For anyone who's just joined in the last few minutes, we're just waiting for some of the document authors to join the meeting, and then we'll be able to proceed. If anyone would like to volunteer to take notes, that would be great.
No crickets.
Lots of crickets.
Yeah, I can definitely help out with it, but it would be good to have someone else. So
yeah, I think Martin maybe might be willing to help along as well, at least for the first hour.
Okay.
So if we want to get a few people to share the effort, that's all good. Okay, let's give it another minute, see if Christian can hop on, but otherwise we'll start. I think we've got enough quorum with document editors to be able to make progress on the issues. Mira, did you have any slides that you prepared, or are we just going to be going directly off of the list you shared to the mailing list?
Yeah, I thought we'd just go by the issues one by one.
Okay, that makes sense. Do you want me to pull that up as a screen share just so we've got something for people to look at, or would you like to do that?
I mean, I think if you can do it, that's easier, yes.
Okay. Can you see that?
I can see something, but it's quite tiny.
Yeah, let me zoom in. How about that?
I think it more or less works. I mean, at the end, people have to look at this themselves anyway, because there's a huge amount of text. Or maybe they have looked at it already. Are we ready to start, or are we?
Yeah, let's crack on with it. Christian might be waking up or whatever, and I think his views. I mean, this is his issue, but I think the views are pretty much captured well on there. So if you want to take things away, Miria, that would be great.
Oh, yeah, okay. I'm seeing there we're still missing some people. Yes. But I guess we can start discussions. Okay, so maybe just before we start on this issue, in case you haven't read the email I've sent on Friday, the plan is to discuss today kind of 3 main issues. I guess some of these issues are a little bit interconnected. So effectively, we will be looking at probably something like 6 GitHub issues, but it's really 3 main topics. And these 3 main topics will be now that we're using the same path ID in both directions, we potentially need to deconflict the use of path IDs if we allow for server-initiated paths. And that's the issue in front of you. This is like the proposal to add an even odd path ID split or not. We already started discussing that at the last meeting, but there's a lot of additional discussion now, so I'm not sure, or like we might have a different conclusion now. Just to give you an overview, the other 2 main discussion points are looking at the closing procedure or the path ID retirement procedure. That probably isn't fully clear now, so we definitely have to change something here, but there's also proposals to kind of simplify that or to figure out how to remove the resources more quickly. And then the third thing we want to discuss is the allocation strategy for connection IDs. Connection IDs are now issued per path, as you might remember, and in order to ensure that both ends have connection IDs for the same path ID, because the same path ID has to be used in both directions, we have to say a little bit more about how to issue the connection IDs to make sure new paths can be opened and maintained correctly. So this is the 3 topics. Because the even odd split proposal was discussed already at the last time, we thought it may be a good start to start with this issue. Yeah, Lucas, I'm not sure if it helps if you scroll to the very end, but effectively, there's kind of a connected issue here, which is really, do we want to allow for server-initiated paths or not? That's an issue that we have open for a long time already. And we didn't decide on yet. We kind of said if we have a use case, we should do it. If not clear. I personally think that actually there's nothing that really stops us from allowing for server-initiated paths. So I think we should just do it. But that's part of the question. But if we do it or not, we have multiple options here. So if we don't allow for server-initiated path, the last proposal was to still reserve half of the path ID space, either the even or the odd numbers, in order to allow this later. However, it's not clear if we really need this even and odd path ID split, even if we allow server-initiated paths, because you can also find other ways to deconflict. And I think there are actually 2 cases here, what you want to deconflict. One is the server and the client at the same time open a different path with a different 4 tuple, but use the same path ID. In this case, there's a failure mode. But on the other hand, if you still only allow client-side migration, then the client basically sees the path validation for a path ID it's already using, because it also has a path validation running, and it should just ignore it because migration is not allowed from the server side. While on the server side, if the server sees a path ID that it's already using with a different 4 tuple, it should just treat this as a migration event. So I think that case is actually kind of covered. The other case is you have the same 4 tuple and both endpoints want to open the path but use a different path ID at the same time. In this case, we currently don't really allow to have multiple paths on the same for tuple in the draft, but we actually could. It's like, it wouldn't break anything. So in that case, I'm also not sure we need deconflicting. And then maybe the last point is, even if we want to do the even odd split, I don't think there's a need to reserve it right now, because when you need a new transport parameter to allow for server initiated paths, you can also define the even odd split then. There's no benefit in defining it like halfway now without defining the other part. So I think at least my proposal, and also what I discussed with Christian, unfortunately we weren't able to like sync up on between all the authors. So my proposal for this issue is basically do nothing.
Cool. Thanks for that, Miria. Thanks for the overview. I just realised I neglected to give everyone a very quick view of the note well. The IETF note well describes the policies and procedures for participation at IETF events, including requirements about intellectual property rights declarations, code of conduct, and how you participate in the events. I'm not going to spend any more time going into that. Please go and read that if you're not familiar with it, or if you need a refreshment. This is very much on individuals to understand those documents in their fullness. I'll leave it at that one. If people want to jump in the queue, we're going to be using the queuing system from Meet Echo. So yeah, please jump in and respond with your viewpoints on whether we should be doing this. I've lost my window. Let me go back. Too many windows. Sorry. Here we go. On the odd even path ID split. Christian? Christian, do you want to go?
I have to unmute. Damn. That's what you get for being a bit too old. Sorry. I agree with Miria. I mean, part of what motivated this discussion is that on one hand, we want to not close what happened when people want to have a symmetric setup of streams. On the other hand, I started doing, following the meeting, the last IETF meeting, I started doing a PR to allow that. And it becomes very long and very intricate to do it, because it changes lots of details. The PR is still there on GitHub. And when I saw that, I said, it doesn't look like something we should be doing as part of just nailing the last issues. And I did then another PR that says, what if we just say that we only use even numbers for the ID? That one is much simpler, because it basically just saying that you use 31 bits instead of 42 doesn't make it very complex. But on the other hand, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't allow for actual creation of stream by the servers, and so basically, when you circle back, you say, well, in any case, if we want to allow the server to open paths, we have to have a number of new management stuff, like how to control the number of paths, how to control the number of connection IDs, and that will require additional transport parameters. So if it does require additional transport parameters, it means that it can be done entirely in a separate extension. As Miria said, we do not really need to do it now. And if we do it now, we are going to do this kind of work, which is based on what we think maybe will be needed, and that's typically not good. So that was my alarm.
Was interrupting you. Let me
no, that was my alarm, because I saw that the meeting, my calendar was at this meeting is starting in an hour, but whatever.
Yeah, I think that was wrong. So actually, this is connected to issue 332 now, which we will discuss at the very end. But I think there is a way to, Christian, you can stay here because I want to check something with you. There is a way to actually allow server initiated paths without any transfer parameter. I think we can actually just do it right now effectively. But so I agree. If we need a transfer parameter,
if we
shouldn't
do not,
anything.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree that that's one of the options you presented. If we do not do the ID split, then we can use exactly what we have now, but we have to find a way to resolve conflicts. And that way may be more or less simple depending on what we want to do, but it doesn't have to be very complex. So yeah.
Exactly. So I think for today, I would like us to just decide on the even odd split if we want it or not. If we don't want it, we can close this issue, and then we can have later some more discussion if we want to allow for server initiated paths in a different way or not. I think, except you have something else, Christian. Martin is in the queue.
Okay, no. You asked me to stay on. That's
Yeah, you can stay the whole time. You're an author and you're very involved. So if you want to stay, you can stay.
So hopefully this doesn't end up with echo because Lucas is right there. So I think that we need to make the decision on the even odd split now. We can't avoid that decision. I was looking at max paths and how that's spelled, and it's currently sort of spelled as a count, but also the count is the value of the maximum maximum path ID that's allowed, and it's a little awkward the way that it's phrased right now, because it's ambiguous as to what that means. So being clear about that now is probably worthwhile. If we're not clear about it, then we'll likely get in trouble if we decide that we can't just deal with the glare issues that happen.
So I mean, this issue came up a couple of times, and we tried to fix it in the last revision on an editorial basis, and then close the related issues. The current phrasing is really aligned on what we have for max streams, which is really the same phrasing. Yes. It says it's the total count allowed for the connection, which reflects basically the max pass number. You know, that phrasing is there in RC 9000. We can change it, we can keep it, but the way it is specified right now, it's basically the max path ID that is specified here.
That's right, and I think it is still confused in the current draft, and
I thought I tried to fix it, but I didn't look at your PR yet. I just saw that the PR there. So any opinions about having or not having the even odd split?
Quentin, go ahead.
Yep. So actually, I was one of the one that actually proposed to split the pass ID in odd and even. The whole idea is that I wanted to have a clear way to determine who is going to create the pass. If we can have a way which is clearly unambiguous to determine who creates the pass and to solve the conflict, if we have the two endpoints that try to create on different four tuples a given pass ID, then I'm fine. We can drop this. Or if we do not want to support server-initiated pass in the end at all, fine as well. But if in the end we want to support server-initiated pass, and we want to drop this, we need to have a clear idea of how we are going to solve the conflict now.
Yeah. Can I ask you one question? So the one thing you cannot have if we don't have the even odd split is to basically say the client is allowed to open 3 passes, but the server is allowed to open 5 passes, right? But is that something that is actually required? Because at the end you will have 8 passes, and that's probably the important part, right? it doesn't matter. At the end, it doesn't matter who opened the path, or does that change? Or is that a factor for you?
It's just that if you can determine if the client can open 3 paths and the server can open 1 path, you may have a finer granularity and a better control on what each endpoint can do. But maybe no one cares.
I mean, what we definitely try to control is like the resources you want to spend on path maintenance, right? So that's like the maximum number of passes you can have in total. But like who opened it, I don't know if that's really that important. You can always close the path and open a new one if you think you want to.
Yeah, but anyway.
Okay, yeah.
That's my point.
Thank you, Christian.
Yes, I mean, what I believe is that it's not a good idea to have an asymmetry between server and client, because if we have an asymmetry, then it will bite us when we do stuff like the emulation of ICE, in which both cooperate to set up a path. And so in the case of NAT traversal or firewall traversal and things like that, you are opening the path, but we don't know who will send the first message. It might be the server, it might be the client, and it might be that they both send it, but only one arrives. And so that's kind of a reason to not have the split.
Magnus, go ahead.
Yeah, I wonder about what does this max do with max path identifiers and the potential for attack surface here when it comes to, because if either of the peer and client and server can increase it, an attacker could force the other endpoint to say, oh, I will raise this value myself and allow you to send much more, try to attempt to open up new paths, etc. And if that's open up an attack surface which currently doesn't exist.
Can I answer that? Can I answer that, Miria?
Go ahead.
Well, Magnus, the reason the PR was complicated is precisely what you say. Is that if you have 2 max paths competing, then you still have to control resource. And that means that you have to have agreement in both cases. So you have to have, hey, I'm the server, I would like to open 159 paths. And you need to have a counter reply from the client, say, no, your server pass, you only can open 7 of them. And
which is the reason why we want this receiving client, or saying the one who's going to be the target for that number of connects or path challenges should be the limiting factor. And that's, if you split the space, at least you could have per directional independent values.
You have the same problem. Because if I say I allow you to open 1 million paths, and it can be unilateral because I am the one allowing you, and you may or may not open those paths, then the client can still immediately send 1 million connection ID for those new paths.
Okay, yeah.
And then you have an overflow of the other guy's resource. So it's really complicated if you do that. I mean, it's really twice as complicated if you split.
But also keep in mind, now that we have bidirectional path IDs, you actually need to have a path ID from both endpoints in order to be able to open a path, right? So if you never issue a path ID for connection IDs for a certain path ID, then the other end cannot open this path. So you have an implicit control about how much paths can be opened or not.
Basically, what max path really controls is how many connection ID the other guy can send. But if you put that too loose, I mean, if I send you 1 million connection IDs, your memory is going to take a hit.
Okay, should we move on to Martin?
So I'm a little confused now. So Christian's, what I read in the document was very unclear about what max paths means. Is it I apply a limit and they apply a limit, and the lower of the two is the one that's operative?
Yes.
Sorry, Christian, you cut off.
Yes, what you said.
Oh, great. Then maybe the draft should say that.
Yeah.
That helps a lot, by the way. That helps.
It kind of says it,
you would
but
need a second one of them if we made the even odd split.
yeah, Martin, it kind of says it, but we have been differing on the issue, and that's one of the reasons Miriam and I would very much like to conclude and say, well, tell us. I believe we don't need to do this split now, definitely. I believe that not doing this split would allow us to clean up the draft and make this kind of thing unambiguous. But tell us.
Christian, do you want to, as we talking about max path now, do we want to maybe jump to issue 332? This is the one about the active connection IDs parameter, or do you want to keep that one to the end?
It might be a good idea to see it now, unless someone objects, because it's clearly clarifying the issue.
Yeah, okay, but Magnus is still in the queue, so let's keep him first.
So just to clarify, does 332 help resolve this question that we're talking about now?
Actually, I think it helps to resolve Martin's question, which I think is an independent question. So maybe we can actually see if we now say the conclusion here for this issue is we don't want to have the even odd split, we can figure out if anybody objects before we move to 332. Anybody thinks we still need the even odd split, please jump into the queue right now. Okay.
Sorry, I don't actually think, but I wanted to say why I don't think, and this is as an individual without my chair hat on, and I'll, the video proof I don't have my hat on. I was a big fan of the even odd split when we kind of talked about it back at Brisbane, because as someone more familiar with how stream IDs work and all of those things, it seemed more natural to carry over that design. What I'm hearing here is actually it opens up even more questions and complexity. Some of that complexity we can design for, right? And we can write all of the text that we need, but adding more text worries me in general, because it adds more interop potential areas of things going wrong. So I'm being convinced that we should keep things simple, because nor am I hearing a compelling use case for making things more complicated. And again, that always worries me.
Yeah, I think we're all in the same boat, that we thought this is a smart idea and then figured out it's more complex than we thought. Michael Erickson is in the queue.
Yes, I've already written an entry in the discussion for this issue, but I think if we go for server-initiated path, then we should split the path IDs into even and odd or some other way, but even and odd is taken straightforward from how streams are done, and that seems to work pretty well. On the other hand, I'm not sure that we need to do this now. I think if we add server-initiated paths, it will be somewhat complex, like Christian says, and then we can also add some kind of, in that separate specification, we can add the separation of the path IDs into even or not and so on.
So I believe Christian can speak for himself, but he said it's complicated if we do even odd split. If we don't do even odd split, it's actually easier to allow for server initiated paths.
Okay.
Or it could be easier. Okay, Martin.
Yeah, I've done it again. Sorry, Lucas. I'm not clear on where the complexities are on this one, because the cases that I'm concerned about most here are those ones where you've got some amount of path IDs available to you, and one or other side decides to spend them in some fashion, and that causes them to be, I guess, bound to a certain set of paths or what have you, and then they're not usable to the other side. That's always a possibility here, particularly when you talk about the server being constrained in how it operates. If the client can migrate one of those paths, then maybe it doesn't really matter where the path IDs get allocated, because the client can just steer them wherever it wants them to go. But if the server is kind of stuck with whatever the client chooses, and it doesn't like what the client has chosen, then it could be difficult. So have we worked through all of those scenarios to everyone's satisfaction? I'm not sure that I'm hearing that in this discussion, although I've not followed all the other ones so far.
So, I mean, I said initially that some of the issues are a little bit interconnected. I think this is where it is. But just to clarify, are you talking about generally opening server-initiated passes, or are you talking about the even?
I'm just talking about this general model of how. So you've got a finite number of path IDs that both sides have agreed on having, and how those are allocated, whether or not the server is initiating them or not. And
okay, so we have, we have
in the case where the client is the only one involved in this, then it's not such a big deal, because then the client has essentially complete control over these things. But if the server's got the ability to say close off paths or create new paths, then both sides then have the ability to deny the other one access to particular path IDs in sort of interesting and potentially destructive ways.
Okay, so we have more issues on that, but let me just quickly answer that one. So the point with multipass is it's multiple passes, right? So you always have another pass. So if somebody doesn't want to open a second pass, and now there's a loop here, then you don't have another pass. You'd still have only the one pass, and you shoot yourself in the foot, and you can't have another pass. So it's like it doesn't break completely, and it's really a decision on each side to say, I support multipass, but I really just want to use 2 passes, and if you want to use more passes, you can't have it because that's my decision, and so I can't allow for it, right? And even if you support multipass, you can say I only want to support 1 path, and I don't allow you to open more passes because that's my strategy, and it doesn't break it. And the other point you can do is you can always, if you're unhappy with where you are, you can always close the path and then open another path somewhere. And of course, the other one can then say, no, I don't want this, I close the path or whatever. But, it's just the additional passes you have. You still should have 1 working path somewhere. So you can, of course, develop very dumb strategies and put yourself into the corner. But, that's your own fault. But again, we have more discussion on CID allocation later as well, because it definitely needs clarification in the draft to avoid the most dumbest cases. Okay, Lucas, do you know if we have a conclusion on this issue now?
I see Michael in the queue, but I don't know if that was a hand.
Right. Sorry. Yes.
No, that's lingering since last time, so I haven't done it myself.
Thanks.
Okay. Obviously, I'm a solo chair here. Matt has scheduling conflicts, which is unfortunate. But I would say what I'm hearing is that there is agreement we should make a decision so we can move on, and that there's probably not new information that we can go and gather to bring to help us resolve this. We have differing opinions, but that there seems a stronger leaning towards not doing anything right now. There's no strong use cases that people have the server chosen. Some of the proponents of the having these odd even path IDs or explicit path IDs are happy to live without them, and as long as some of the other criteria that they have. And if we go for this single space, as Martin just put in the chat, and we discover that there are issues, then we will revisit the discussion of not doing the split, and we'll do it if we really have to. And some of that might come with implementation experience, etc. But for now, in order to keep progress, we're just not going to do this. That's what I'm hearing as a chair, and I will reflect into the notes on this issue on the GitHub.
Okay, so I believe that means we will then, after the meeting, close this issue with no actions.
I will take that to the list so that we give people opportunities. Not everyone could make this meeting. Scheduling is really hard because of our wonderful diverse locations of the authors and interested parties. So yeah, we'll effectively, after this call, send an email to the list of all of the items from the meeting and give people a week or 2 to respond to those things, and then we can start to close things out.
Definitely, yes. I just want to say there is another old issue, which is, I don't know the number, let me try to find it quickly, about allowing server-initiated passes. It's really one of the early ones we had. Issue. Sorry. Yeah, so this is the issue number 47. It's really old. So this is the issue about allowing server-initiated paths. So even if we close this issue now, you can still have discussion about server-initiated paths there. Okay. Okay, so, yeah, we don't need to discuss it now. We can leave that open.
Okay.
Christian, we are supposed to see Luca's screen, but it's also just showing the issue, so you can just look at the issues yourself. Let's quickly jump to issue 332, because hopefully, or maybe this answers some of Martin's questions. Okay, this one seems like a small change, but it's a little bit of a fundamental issue from my point of view. And I think we need to discuss it at some point. So there is this parameter called active connection IDs, which limits in RFC 9000, limits the number of connection IDs the other endpoint can issue to you. The purpose of this is not to like overload you with like 1 million connection IDs and you have to store them somewhere and like use a lot of memory. Totally makes sense. Also, before we go on, keep in mind that like it is important to have the limit there. It's not important to like have a very like tight limit, because storing one connection ID isn't like that expensive. It's only if you like get 1 million, right? But it probably doesn't matter that much if you get like 10 or 11 or 12. So this parameter was changed in the last revision with the explicit connection ID to now apply per path. That means as long as you don't have a limit on the number of passes, you again could like issue an infinite number of connection IDs, because you can just create an infinite number of path IDs. However, so then we introduced the max path ID to also limit the number of path IDs. However, I really wonder if that is needed at all, because the point is really to control the one resources that takes up your memory, which is the connection ID. As long as you have a connection ID for a path ID and you didn't open the path yet, you don't have any additional state. The only thing you need to store is the connection ID. Only at the point of time where you actually open the path, you will have to store a lot of additional state. But as long as the path is not open, you only have to store the connection ID together with path ID, of course. But you know, that's the resource you really want to control here. The way to control the number of active passes is actually now easy, because we use the same path ID on both sides. So only if both endpoints issue path IDs for like issue path IDs for the same path ID, you can open a path. So you can always, by issuing connection IDs or not issuing connection IDs for a certain path ID, you can control how many passes can be opened in total. So if we take the limit of active connection IDs back to being global for the whole connection, there's actually no need to even single how many passes you want the other to open. You can just control it implicit by issuing not more path IDs together with your connection IDs. Again, we started discussing that you need a good strategy to not end up in a situation where like one endpoint issues path IDs number whatever 3 and 4, and the other one issues 5 and 6, and then you can never open a new path. But and we have to say more about this in the draft. There's too little information about this in the draft at the moment. But on the one hand, like if you shoot yourself in the foot and you do a stupid thing, then it doesn't work. But you don't have like a memory leak or anything like that. So and we have a separate discussion on allocation strategy, again, which we need to clarify, but maybe we need to decide this thing first before we can go on with that discussion. Martin.
So I already put this in the chat. So, I've heard a couple of times that you can have a path available, but you don't have the connection IDs, and so you effectively can't use that path. And I haven't thought deeply about this. This is just an idea, but this sounds like this situation sounds more like a bug to me than a feature. So I'm wondering if we should do something similar to what we do with the server preferred address, where if the server issues this or sends this transport parameter and allows migration to a server preferred address, it has to send one connection ID and a stateless reset token in that transport parameter. So the analogy here would be if I allow opening a new path, can we have a frame? Can we have the encoding such that you have to issue a new connection ID for that path as well?
So you, I'm not sure I fully understand your proposal. So the way, if you want to open a new path, the way this works is you cannot open a path where the other end didn't provide you a connection ID that is, or didn't provide you any connection ID with an unused path ID. So now if you, for example, you got one connection ID with an unused path ID from the other peer, you can effectively open a path, but only if you also have issued a connection ID for the same path ID. So it's your local decision to say, oh, before I can open this path, I didn't issue a connection ID to the other end yet, but I can first issue the connection ID and then just open my path and I can do it.
Yeah, I can't tell you exactly what the attack would be, but it seems like having the situation where I can issue new paths and these paths can't be used unless I do something else as well. That seems complicated.
Yeah, but that's already where we are, because you really need both endpoints to issue connection IDs for the same path ID before you can open a path, I believe. So, Martin.
We have to coordinate here who gets to speak. So I kind of like Martin's idea here, only because it means that when you create a new path, there's something deliberate in that, and like he said, the analogy to the preferred address is quite a good one. It says, here I would like to increase the path count by 1 to whatever, and here's a connection ID. The problem with this, I think, is once we get into the sort of frame semantics and logistics of the situation, you can't say increase the path limit by 1 in a frame type. You have to say this is path ID blah, and here's a connection ID for it, and here's a stateless reset token, and all those sorts of things, which I think is probably better in balance, but leads to weird sort of complexity. So if your path limit is up to 3 and you want to issue number 4, you also have to admit the possibility that 5 might arrive before 4 does, and so you have to deal with the ordering out of order arrival of those frames. I'm not sure then whether it's anything more than an interesting idea, but the idea that you can say max paths is whatever it was plus 10, and then have those 10 new paths be completely unusable until you've sent a whole bunch of new connection ID frames is a bit strange to me. I would have said that the multipath new connection ID frame would be sufficient to create those paths, in fact.
Again, the problem is you need, currently you need both endpoints issuing connection IDs for the same path ID.
Correct.
Are you proposing to change that?
But if your suggestion is that that there's a global limit on the number of connection IDs that you retain, and then each endpoint gets to choose how those connection IDs are allocated to paths, and may do so in a suboptimal fashion, but we'll have to deal with that. Maybe you have to have, anyway, But if you only open a new path by sending a new connection ID on that path, and there's no max paths frame, that sort of works as well.
That's what
Max
I'm
path
proposing
doesn't do
here.
anything in that case.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm proposing here. I'm saying if we keep the limit of connection IDs per connection, we don't need max path.
That might work out.
Okay,
And
Christian.
that solves Martin's concern, I think, as well.
First, let me explain why I have some bad feeling in the back of my neck when I hear this discussion. We have a knack in this working group on trying to do things one way, go all the way into exploring the way to do that thing, then saying, hey, no, we should not use the CIDs, I mean the connection, the pass number per CID. We just wait maybe 6 months finding the other way. And we have the other way now. And I'm hearing says, yeah, but that other way is not perfect. Maybe we should try some yet another way. And let's be clear, each time we make a decision like that, we delay the production of the result by 6 months. So when you are doing something like that, you really have to wait. I mean, is it something that is important enough that we delay the standard by 6 months?
So I share the concern. I feel with this issue, because we changed so many things with the explicit pass ID, we changed one thing too much here, right? And maybe nobody realized, like we made it more complicated than it needed to be. And what I really want to make sure is that we consider this carefully now, make a decision, and then like have the decision and never visit again, right?
So what you are discussing, basically the other model that Martin is hinting at, and Martin as well, is saying, okay, the CIDs are not in fact created attached to a pass. We don't do all these multi-pass new CID thing, etc. at all. What we do is that we have, during the pass challenge, we are going to say, I use that CID, and indeed you do because you have to pick one. And then you say, and by the way, the pass ID for that pass that I'm creating will be this. And here we can have indeed split or whatever. But and the other, and you have also to guarantee that there is another pass ID and another CID available in the pass challenge. So basically, we would bite something that we have been looking at for at least 5 years, that says that when we do a pass challenge, we have to attach a new CID to that pass challenge so that we guarantee that the other guy has a CID. And we also have to now, if we don't have the pass ID, I mean the CID is attached to a pass ID, then we need to have a choice of the CID as part of the pass challenge. And if we do that, I would agree that it is probably better to have a split of pass ID, being there's a server pass ID and a client pass ID, and everything as those two things, which creates, I mean, it's on one hand, it does simplify the management of pass. On the other hand, it has cascading complexity when you are doing things like abandon a pass. I mean, when you abandon a pass, what is the ID you are using? Can you use the server ID, the client ID, either one, both? And the same for all kinds of stuff. And when you are creating, well, basically that's it. It also makes, if the connection IDs are not attached to a pass explicitly, then it makes things like distinguishing between NAT traversal and pass connection ID migration. It makes that more difficult. So it's a balloon. I mean, if we push complexity one way, it pops up the other way. And that's why I am worried. I mean, it's one of those 6 months of delay things before we say, oops, it was not that.
Yeah, So you're commenting on Martin's proposal, not on this issue we have on the screen right now about the active.
Yeah, I was
field.
going to, yes, I was
Okay.
going to, I mean,
Yes, and
changing that right now.
Yeah, I'm absolutely sharing your concern, and especially what you said right now. This issue to distinguish between a new pass and a pass migration event. That was exactly the issue we've been trying to solve with the explicit path ID, right? So if we change anything and have this issue again, then that doesn't make any sense.
We do solve it.
Yeah.
Now, on the other hand, asking that a connection ID is always bundled with a pass challenge, that's something that we can do. It would solve Martin's issue.
Jan Mai.
Yeah, hi. Actually, I think it's better that the active connection ID limit need to be per pass if we want to insist on the explicit pass ID proposal. Actually, we have already discussed this issue in the PR 292, and I'd like to explain a little bit more here. The whole explicit pass ID design required that the CID sequence number to be generated under per pass instead of generated for the whole connection in IFC 9000. And also the retire prior to field is also used for per pass as part of the corresponding mechanism. And the core design is able to work. The transport parameter active connection ID limit, it actually describes the limit of active connection IDs for the connection in IFC 9000, and we transmit it for per pass as we change the CID allocation for per pass. If it is still for the whole connection, there could be terrible situations that endpoints use too much CIDs on the previous passes, and they don't have enough CIDs for creating the new pass. It could cause the CID allocation strategy to be complicated for implementations. And although we could set the limit as the active connection ID limit per pass, plus the pass number, but it will be easy for attackers to generate more CIDs under one single pass and try to force the peer to allocate more necessary memory. And it's kind of like attack scenario. So I think for conclusion, it's easy and clear to use the active connection ID limit for per pass.
So just to clarify, so if you have a connection ID limit per path, I don't think there's an attack here because it really limits the maximum connection IDs per path, right? You can't have more than that. So it's rather the opposite. Like if you allow connection IDs per pass and not per connection, then you might end up with more connection IDs than you wanted. I also want to comment on allocation strategy. So we do have to clarify the allocation strategy. It's not clear no matter what we do on this issue. And you don't have to tightly control the active connection ID limit, right? So it's really important to have your limit. But for example, if you say, I personally, on my side, I don't want to have more than 5 active passes at the same time, you should set your active connection ID limit to at least 10 so you can allow migration on each of your 5 passes. But you can also set it to like 20 or 30 or whatever, because it's not like a huge amount of additional memory. It's just important to control it if you want to be on the safe side. The way how you control the active number of passes is by you not issuing more pass IDs than you want to use. So I believe the queue is empty. I believe the discussion, and I don't follow it super tightly on the chat, is like drifting away in a different direction. So, okay, Magnus.
So I wonder if Martin Thompson isn't on to something in the chat here around the configuration. Are you certain that you will not have SIDs that need to be created specifically to match one entry point through your network?
To match what? Sorry.
To match it, I mean, saying if you have one address at the interface, an address, etc., which, for example, is behind the load balance, and you need to fulfill the load balance in semantics, then those SIDs might not only work through that interface, while on another interface you can have another structure for SIDs.
Yes, so this issue we're looking at right now, it's not changing that connection IDs are allocated per path. It's just changing the limit that is signaled as the transport permit at the beginning to be for the whole connection and not per path. But the connection IDs itself will be issued per path. And really, the active connection ID limit is not a parameter that should help you have your allocation strategy. It's really just a parameter that should limit your memory use. And I think that's the purpose we should maintain. But Christian is in the queue.
Yeah, Magda's point is correct. I mean, there are cases where you want to connect to create a new path and say, and for that new path, please use exactly this connection ID, because that's a load balancer issue. Okay, and that goes towards the same point we have been hinting at, is that when you issue a path challenge, you probably want to select the path ID, the connection ID, and ipso facto the path ID on which you want to receive that path.
Martin?
Yeah. Just have to wait for the ball here. So I think this is right. I think Christian's entirely correct that when you challenge along a particular path, it really makes sense to be able to say, I'm challenging, here's all the ways in which you respond along this path such that the response will get back to me in a sensible fashion. That's, I think, very sensible. The problem that I have with that particular arrangement, and the reason that I mentioned this thing, and I apologize for diverging a little bit from the core issue here, but I think we'll come back to it, is that you have to pick a connection ID to send that path challenge with, and you have no idea about how that connection ID relates to the address that you're sending toward or the address that you're coming from. And so I suspect that there are scenarios in which we will need to be able to say, talk about adding addresses to things and having a set of path IDs or connection IDs bound to those addresses, rather than just having a bucket of them.
I'm not sure I see this use case, because if you issue a connection ID, no matter for... So I'm not sure I understand the issue, because if you are issuing connection ID, no matter for which path, then you have to tell your load balancer how to handle this connection ID. Like, you cannot just issue a connection ID and then do nothing, right? Because this is the load balancers at your end where you receive.
You know, the problem here, of course, is, sorry, the problem here is, let's say that you have multiple interfaces and those have different routing infrastructure in front of them. If you hand a connection ID out to the other end with no additional constraints on how that is used, you have no way of knowing whether it will come in through one piece of infrastructure or the other. And I mean, you could just issue them and hope that the other side picks the right one, and then some paths will just fail, and eventually maybe you'll get through on the right path.
So you're now trying to you change the design of multipath in order to make your load balancer structure easier, because you could just tell all your load balancers, no matter where you are, what are the current connection IDs, right? Why does it help you to tell your load balancers only like half of the connection IDs that you have issued?
The load balancer has a say about what connection IDs you use. You can't just pick a connection ID and say, hey, everyone, this connection ID is now me, because there's always the possibility that connection ID is in use at that load balancer and not at another one. So it's always a negotiation. If you look at the QUIC LB draft, it's always about understanding what connection IDs are available on that path and what connection IDs are not. And so I don't think you can always just get away with.
So you have the scenario, you have two interfaces, you have two load balancers, and they both issue you a connection ID. You have to coordinate those load balancers anyway, because they cannot issue the same connection ID. And if you have to coordinate those load balancers, they could also just know what connection IDs they have issued to the same server instance.
Well, there's always a possibility that they could collide because they each have their own conception of what that connection ID is. But I'm more concerned about the case where one load balancer gives you a connection ID, but the other load balancer understands that connection ID to route to a completely different server instance. In which case that connection ID will break.
Okay, maybe open an issue. Christian?
I think we are going into the woods there.
Mm-hmm.
We really are going into the woods. I would like, because Martin first, that problem is not solved in RFC 9000 either.
It is.
Why? No. We solve that in a simple way, saying that only the client creates connection IDs.
We just don't have multipath, so it's not a problem.
No. So basically, the scenario that you describe, I mean, we start from the position of the 9000 in which only the client creates paths. Okay? And then you're telling me, but I want to have several paths connected to different load balancers using different classes of connection IDs. That's kind of a new problem that was not in the job definition. And I am a bit concerned that doing that is basically you're putting extra requirements that are not addressed in 9000. In 9000, the server provides a bag of connection IDs to the client, and the client picks whichever to create a new path. And the reason it works is that the server has only one address, the client has only one address for the server, and it works. Now, if you say we are going to have several addresses for the server, you have this new bag of complexity coming in. And I am really concerned about taking that new bag of complexity right now in the spec, because that's a sure way to never converge the damn spec.
So I also want to add, in the worst case, it just doesn't work. In the worst case, you just can't open a second path, and it's fine. You have only one path. It's not like the end of the world. If you design your load balancer structure in that way, then you maybe need an extension to make it work. But you can open an issue and we can have more discussion there. I just would like to actually prefer to go through the issues we already have.
I put myself in the queue speaking as an individual. I'm a bit confused by some of the load balancer chat. Like the way we do things is we have like a scheme, and the server that's handling the QUIC connection actually picks the concrete connection IDs it's using, and the load balancer understands them. We're not going and speaking to a load balancer, and you could argue, well, it's the load balancer decided what that scheme was or whatever. Like I don't really care who decided what it is. The person who owns generating the SID and doing the management of those things is the server, and if it's generating values that are going to result in the packet's not ending up to it, it's broken. And this is so bespoke or proprietary to how we want to route packets in our infrastructure. I can't see anything like that the spec can help or say other than don't do it wrong, which seems pretty obvious to me. It seems like a tangential issue to what we're discussing here on 332. Allocations, strategies for those kinds of things, great. Maybe that's something we should think about in the load balancer document, or another thing, or as a separate issue or a PR here. That's all good text, but like for this specific issue, I'm not necessarily seeing any consensus forming on what to do, and I don't know if other people disagree with me. If they do, I'd like them to speak up, because it would be nice to close this out, and if that requires a different issue so it's clearer to people what we're trying to solve, I think that would help everyone.
Well, I think that we have kind of a consensus, and that Miria is in the rough. And the consensus is to keep what we have now. I mean, we have to, one problem, which is limit the overall number of connection IDs so that we don't explode the memory of a node. And if you said the limit is number of paths multiplied by some constant, it's still limited. Doesn't explode.
So
we don't have an urgent problem to solve there. And if we basically the design we have works from that point of view, and I would rather I agree with Jan-May there, and Michael made the same observation that what we have does work. That's not an operating problem. Let's keep it that way.
Okay, just double checking. So for sure both works, right? You can either have a total connection ID limit, or you can have one per path as long as you define the maximum of paths. What I'm saying is, if we have the total limit, we don't have to define the maximum number of passes, and that makes the whole protocol more simple. So you're saying it is worth the effort to, because like this is kind of having the max pass IDs is solving a problem that we don't need to have. I feel the whole max pass ID approach is very complicated. Maybe it's just like it's not clearly described, but it seems like complicated, and we actually don't need it. That's what I'm saying. So just to be, I mean, like I can accept whatever we decide here. Just want to be clear that it's like it's not about one is working and one is not working. It's about we have one which is very straightforward, and the other one creates a lot of additional machinery we wouldn't need.
But if you the logical thing is, if you don't want to limit the number of CID per pass, that means that you are going to not want to bind the CID to pass when they are created.
No, that's not the concept.
Well, yes.
No.
In fact, you are.
No, I don't think so. I don't think it would change anything else in the draft. The only change, so let me say what, the only change you would have is you don't need max pass ID anymore. And we need to give more recommendations about how to usefully send this active connection ID to a value that is not too small. And we have to discuss more about the allocation strategy, but this is undefined at the moment anyway. So, but it wouldn't change anything else in the draft.
I think that, I mean, I have implemented the draft, Michael has implemented the draft, Jan-May has implemented the draft, and tell you it's not a problem. So I don't know. Well, I said what I wanted to say. Okay.
Okay. Okay, I think also my intention really about this issue was to be sure everybody understands the other option here. I think the default is to not change anything in the draft. That's fine for me. But this issue, and that's why we discussed it now first, has some interconnection with the other discussions we will have next. So as long as everybody understands the issue and the different approaches to it, it's fine. Let's move on.
Okay, Kate, just as a chair then, having had a bit more information, I'm hearing that people would be okay with doing nothing and closing this with no action. Is that a fair reflection, Miriam?
I personally would think I would record the outcome of the interim to do nothing here. I would probably. Oh, we can probably. I just wanted to say I would probably like to keep it a little bit longer open to be sure that everybody understands the implication for the other issues, but we can also close it for now. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just put a reflection of the meeting. This will be in the minutes. Yeah. Again, we'll put it to the list, and anyone can feel free. I'm not going to go and close this issue immediately, in case that's your concern.
Yeah. No, but anyway, yeah, I think you're right.
Thanks.
Yes. Okay. Let's keep even so we discussed this already a little bit, let's keep the connection ID allocation strategy till the end, because I think the more burning issue for us is actually the path closing strategy, and that is the main issue here is 313.
Give me a second to type.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so in version 07, there was quite a bit of confusion about what to do when to close a path. I think there were a little bit contradicting or not, things that didn't fit together. So before the explicit path ID, the closure procedure was the following. You send a path abandon frame. The path abandon frame tells the other end that it should not send on the path anymore, that you're planning to tear down the path. You then wait for 3 PTOs. The other end may or may not send you a path abandon as well. It's a should in the draft. And then after 3 PTOs, you actually send a connection ID retirement frame for the connection ID that is used on that specific path, and that will close down the path. First of all, now that we have per path connection IDs, that means you cannot only retire one connection ID, you have to retire all connection IDs that were issued for this path, and both endpoints actually kind of have to do that on both sides because we use the same connection ID on both ends. So effectively, you can only close the path now if both endpoints have retired all connection IDs that belong to this path ID. So the other alternative is a little bit to kind of change the signal that we have with path abandoned and also make kind of the retirement more implicit. Specifically, one thing to consider is that this model of closing a path was very much designed very similar to like closing a connection, where if you close a connection, you want to have a greasing period where you're still able to receive and send data in order to send X and like, you know, set down the state in a graceful way. This is not really needed for multipass because by definition, you always have another pass. Like if you close the last part, that's a connection close. But if you have another pass, it means you can immediately say, I want to close down the pass and I promise you to not send anything on the pass anymore because I can send everything I want on this other pass I still have. And that could make things a little bit easier. What that means is, I think what we want to change here is to, first of all, require a path abandon from both sides. So if you send a path abandon, you also want the other one to send a path abandon and then the path is closed. And effectively, you don't need an explicit connection ID requirement because as soon as the path ID is closed, everything has been progressed. You can forget everything you know about the path, including all the connection IDs on both sides. Maybe there are still some details that need to be worked out, but I think the point is here to have a general discussion about this high-level change. And maybe, Christian, you want to add something because you have thought about this a lot and you have also opened the issue.
Well, the issue was open after the interop in Brisbane. And after the interop in Brisbane, we found that this business of closing the pass and retiring the pass ID was kind of ambiguous. And the real problem is that if you have abandoned a pass, you don't care about that pass. You don't care. So do you care enough about the pass that you don't care to first abandon it and then say, come back and say, oh, by the way, yes, please retire this and that connection ID. And my understanding is that people are lazy. And if you have an operating mode in which the laziness goes to not retiring, the laziness drives not doing the extra work of retiring CIDs, and that laziness leads to a memory leak at the peer. And so I would rather not have that failure mode and say, if you retire a pass, if you abandon a pass, I mean, the whole pass is gone. I mean, you are saying, I'm not going to use that anymore. You're not in a halfway state of some kind. You're saying, I'm not going to use that. Yes, you will want to have some little bit of timer because packets are in transit and all that. That's it. That's all. So basically, I am for allowing people to be lazy because they will be lazy anyhow. And if they are lazy, I would like the right result to happen.
So actually there is maybe also something that came up in the discussion is there's actually multiple resources connected to a path, right? So one is the connection IDs, which is actually, I think, the easier part. But then you still, for example, have to remember the pass ID in order to be able to retransmit the pass abandoned or to send X for this pass and whatever. And then at a later point of time, you can only remove the pass ID. So.
Yeah, and to come to Martin's point, it'd be nice if the encoding was such that you always do the right thing. So it'd be nice, for example, if you always bundled a final ACK with an abandon.
Yeah, but can you enforce that? I mean, you can't actually. That's the answer, because you can also send abandoned frames for both sides at the same point of time, and then something happens, right?
That is actually your interest. That is actually your interest. I mean, I'm looking at laziness and self-interest. I mean, the parties are self-interested in not having something they lost, something they receive sent again, because it consumes their resources. It makes them run things twice, etc. So it's probably okay.
So again, we have to work out the details, but on the high level, I think what we want to change is that you always must send a pass abandon in both directions. So we have a clear signal, and we don't require a separate retirement frame after the closure. I think that's kind of on a high level what we want to change.
Yeah, so that sounds good to me, in the sense that you then have a clear agreement from both sides that that not only am I not using it, you're not using it. The concern that I'd have then is what to do about reordered packets around those abandonment frames. So packet reordering will mean that there is still a timer running, but at the same time, it should only be reordering that is then in play at that point. Both sides have a clear, we're done. And packets that arrive after those may or may not be handled. That's fine. They could probably be declared lost successfully if they're never acknowledged, but it does mean that the acknowledgements may have to follow other paths once both sides have sent the abandonment. That seems sensible to me. I don't know why we would do anything else.
Okay. Yes. So this point about reordering is something we can just decide if we want to handle reordering and like have a timer, or if we don't want to handle reordering and then have a little bit of loss eventually if there's a lot of reordering. I think that's a detail, but yes. So there's a lot of discussion and there's a lot of details to be worked out here. So please read all the issue on GitHub. But so far it sounds to me we should probably work on a PR for this change. Mike.
Yeah, I think we have to have the timer, because even though one side has sent the abandon, if you still have packets trickle in, they're going to generate a stateless reset that is interpreted as valid from the other side. And unless the stateless reset only blows up the path and not the connection, then we have a problem. If we have a timer where you allow some time and the other side is able to abandon the path as well, which means it's no longer going to accept the stateless reset as valid, then that resolves it.
Yeah, I think you have a similar problem actually when you retire connection IDs in the regular QUIC. So if you get out of order packets there, you also get the stateless reset back actually. And the thing is, when you get that back to the original sender, it will realize this is not for connection ID that I still have. So it must be a bogus one and ignore it basically. So you actually have the same thing. You have to handle it already. That's my point.
Okay, so I've been listening and trying to scroll through some of the text on this issue. There's a lot of discussion already. I think I haven't digested it, I'll be honest, but what I'm hearing is that there is agreement that we should consider this issue properly, and that there's something that needs to be done, and that someone should go and write a PR. I don't know who that person is. Kristen opened the issue. I don't know if maybe the authors want to amongst themselves decide how to address this, and it sounds like maybe there's some text we can borrow from ROC 9000 in terms of design. That seems like a reasonable outcome for this one. Christian?
Yeah, I can definitely do a PR on that. I said that in the chat, but the stateless recess is a red herring. Because if you retire a CID, you also retire the stateless reset signature. So even if you do receive a stateless reset, you are going to ignore it because you don't have the signature for it anymore. And so the timer is useful, but it's basically an optimization. The timer is say, we do that so we don't send a stateless reset that we don't need to send.
Right. But if one side,
no, if you have retired the connection ID, you have retired the 16 bytes that create the signature for that connection ID. So even if you do receive a stateless reset, it's not for your connection anymore.
right. The case I'm concerned about is when one side has sent abandon and the other one hasn't processed it yet. So it doesn't, when there's disagreement about whether that path is still open.
You have to look at basically the abandons the CID that you have sent. Not abandon the CID that you have received, not the CID that you have sent.
Okay. So if you send an abandon to say you're not using a path anymore, and then you subsequently receive packets, I think we have to mandate that timer so that you don't receive packets on that path.
Basically, you end up with something like the draining period of the connection close. So basically, you send your connection ID, your abandon, you enter a draining period for the pass. That draining period stops normally when you receive the abandon from the other guy. If you never receive the abandon from the other guy, that's a connection error. I mean, I'm going to write that in the PR and then we can discuss it.
Mike, could I ask you to review that PR as well? Because it seems like there's some interesting stuff going on.
Of course.
Yes, I understand this correct. Well, this draining period is basically saying you're waiting for the pair to ensure that it drains its packet before it responds with the path abandon from its side. There's some leeway there to ensure that you have the draining time. And then, and then you have a final timer for any last reordering or something. So I think that will work fine.
Okay, so that one seems pretty good. There's some good discussion about specifics, but I don't think we need to try and resolve that in this meeting, and that we can just say Christian's going to write up a PR, and everyone who cares about timers is going to deeply review it on a good short timer.
Okay, I would like to quickly jump to issue 366 because it's slightly related. So this is, should we require an explicit path abandon after pass timeout? Actually, we already have this in the draft, and it's like maybe in the wrong place in the draft, so it's hard to find. We should put it somewhere else so people can find it more easily. But the draft already says if you have a pass timeout, you should send an abandon frame. Also, if you try to use a path ID, open a path, and your path validation fails, you have consumed the path, and the other end doesn't know that you have tried to use the path and you have consumed it. So you also have to send a path abandon on a different path, on a different open path. I think related also to the discussion we had right now on the closing, this should be a must. Whenever you don't use a path ID anymore, you must send an abandon frame. And this is, I think, not in the issue, but also related to path allocation, CID allocation strategies. We could even go one step further and say you can even send a path abandon frame for a path that you, for example, never received any CIDs for, but you have issued CIDs for, but in the other end, you have issued CIDs for path ID, and the other end never issued you some CIDs for the same path ID, so you cannot use them. And then you can still abandon them and say, now I want to use a different one. And that is again connected to another issue. Sorry, they are all a little bit interconnected, which is issue 318. And that issue is saying, should we allocate path IDs in continuously, basically in order? And for example, if you require in order and you don't receive a path ID, you could still abandon it and then use the next one or whatever. So this all belongs a little bit together with the path allocation strategy. And you can read these issues yourself, because I really want to jump to then issue number 338. But I want to say, for what we kind of propose here is that you always must abandon a path ID if you don't want to use it anymore. It should not be a should, it should be a must. And we also want to recommend to use path IDs in order, because these things together then hopefully simplify our CID allocation strategy, which is issue 338. Okay, let's see if there are comments. Magnus? Or are you okay? Jan Mai?
Yeah, actually, I support that there is a must for this kind of situation, because endpoints might have different idle timeout threshold, but the path abandon frame would always give a clear signal that the peer closed the path without any ambitions.
Yep. Yeah, so with that, I would actually, Lucas, like to jump to issue 338.
Sure, let me type.
Okay, so this issue is what we discussed a little bit here and there already, is how can we ensure that you can actually, do the thing you want to do. You can open a path, you have the right path IDs, and you don't have issued a lot of unused path IDs and CIDs or whatever. Because the situation here could be one endpoint issues path connection IDs for path 3 and 4, and the other endpoint issues connection IDs for path 5 and 6, and then you can never open a path because they're just not the right connection path IDs available that fit together. We can probably never fully resolve this solution. Like if you apply, because it's really not enforceable. So if you apply a stupid strategy, you might just shoot yourself in the foot. But we can try to do a couple of things to make this easier and better. And so one thing we want to recommend here, I think, is that each endpoint opens or provides a number of the minimum of the 2 maximum path IDs that's announced by both endpoints. So if endpoint says, one endpoint says I want to have 3 passes and the other endpoint says I want to have maximum 5 passes, then both endpoints should provide basically path IDs for 3 passes at least. And you should provide the path IDs in order. So, if currently all passes up to path number 3 are used, or no, if you currently use path number 0, you have a maximum of 3 path IDs, then both endpoints should issue connection IDs for path 1 and 2. That's the recommendation. Again, all of this can only be a recommendation. But for example, if you could also close a path ID for a path that you never have received any CIDs, you could say, I've never saw any CIDs from you for path number 1, so I'm closing it right now, and then we'll send you new CIDs for path number 3, and then we can maybe use path number 3 instead. So kind of, this is a little bit the strategy that is proposed here, and that's why this is all a little bit interconnected. And I believe there's much more in the issue that you have to read that I maybe didn't mention yet. Lucas, you're not muted. I'm not sure that's on purpose, but of course
Sorry,
you can
no,
share.
That's just me. I have nothing more to add. Please, anyone join the queue if you have some comments on this issue.
Or maybe I didn't explain it well enough, so if like Christian, Jan Mai, or anybody else from the authors want to say something more, please do so. Yeah, Quentin.
Yeah, just to clarify a bit, actually, if you do not use a pass ID, you still have the max pass ID that limits the maximum number of pass ID you can have. So is it a big issue? Actually, not sure. Is it a strong concern in the end?
No, the
Because
issue is, I think, the thing that you experienced during the interop, where basically, I guess you already implemented the even odd split to some extent. So you announced pass ID 2, and Christian wanted to use pass ID 1 in his implementation, and at the end you were not able to open a path, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So to migrate this situation, we want to recommend to issue the maximum number of passes that you expect. Yeah, and also issue the pass IDs in order.
Okay, I think I understand. You mean that here you expect to use the pass with the ID in order. But if you have, for instance, 0 and 2, you want to use 1, but you do not have 1, and you get stuck due to that. Okay. If pass ID 2 is available, why not using it?
Yeah, so then you basically, so you have a maximum number of passes of 2. Let's keep it easy, right? You're using pass number 0 already. Now you issue CIDs for pass number 1, and the other one issues CIDs for pass number 2. Now both of you have issued CIDs for 2 passes, and you cannot open a new path. So somehow you now have to retire one of the pass IDs before you can actually issue. Like, for example, you have issued pass ID 1, and before you can issue something for pass ID 2, you have to retire everything for pass ID 1, and then you can issue pass ID 2.
Okay.
While if both of you would have issued for pass ID 1 at the beginning, you wouldn't even have that problem.
Yeah. Okay. So we should enforce some way that the sender should then use continuously the pass IDs. So if I announce pass 2, I should have announced pass 1. In some sense, it's an enforcement on the sender, but at receiver side, you have no way of enforcing this because you may have reordering, packet loss, and so on.
Yeah, so you can not fully enforce it, but we can recommend it, which we currently don't. So we should put text in there to say it's a should and recommend it. The only way you can halfway enforce it is to allow abandoning of passes that you didn't even open. Basically, you say, I want to retire the pass IDs that you issued to me, even so we're not having a path here because we can't use it.
Yeah, so probably we should discuss this a bit in the text, I would say, and we should explain why this matters. But I'm not sure there is not much more we should do in the end, except that please advertise connection IDs for pass IDs continuously, and that's it. Yeah, not much to add.
Yeah, I mean, it's two things. It's one, so so A, use them in order continuously, and B, I think currently the recommendation in the draft is you should issue at least one unused path ID. And we could change this recommendation to say you should issue path IDs for the minimum number of both of the max passes announced. So you have just a better choice of path IDs, or you can even open 2 passes at the same time. So if you say you want to, currently recommendation is just issue at least one unused path ID. But if you say you want to use 3 passes in parallel, I want to use 5 passes in parallel, the minimum of that is 3. So you should actually issue 2 unused path IDs in addition to the 1 path you're already using. Sorry, I'm not explaining this well.
No, I just messed up with my browser. Just that if both endpoints advertise a maximum pass ID of 2, let's say you have 0, 1, 2, and both say 2, and the client decides to create 3 paths on 0, 1, 2. How can you provide an additional unused pass ID? I'm not sure to get this. Because you are
So,
limited by the max
no, you
pass.
can. Yeah. So let's say, sorry, I forgot something here. Let's say you only have one pass open.
Okay, if
Okay,
you have
you
only
have one
one.
pass, and now both of the endpoints announce, let's say, a 3. Then currently we're saying you should just like at least provide one more pass ID that's unused. And now we could change this to say provide 2 more pass IDs that are unused, because in total you want to have 3. So you should provide all the pass IDs right away. And that gives you more choice in which pass ID to pick.
Yeah, but you need to keep in the limits of the max pass ID.
Yes,
frame.
you need to keep the limit of the max pass. So
Okay.
it's like it's
Yeah,
a minimum of the 2 max pass announced by both of the ends, but then you should issue pass IDs for this number of passes instead of just one additional one. If the max pass ID allows it, yes.
Yeah, but that's actually somewhat implicitly stated by the max pass ID. Yeah,
So, but as I said, what we're currently saying is we recommend to like provide one unused pass ID if it's allowed. And so we would change this recommendation to provide more unused pass IDs up to the max limit.
Okay, but then we need to enforce and to clearly state that we should do that, but only if we are allowed by the limits.
Yes, I think that's absolutely that's already there. If you go above the limit, then you have a pass failure and you close the connection. So yes, you cannot do that.
So
yes.
That's the part that.
Okay, sorry. Yes, absolutely.
But okay,
yeah.
For the rest, I'm fine. Okay.
Okay.
I will leave the floor to Christian.
Yes.
Yeah, just saying that if we make a practical recommendation that people do things in order, it will facilitate interop. It will avoid people having crazy ID that I just only want to use prime numbers on my CIDs or whatever, and doesn't cost anything. So let's just do that because help people keep in the path that we know works well. It's a good thing. And otherwise, then we have mitigating strategy like abandoning the path that you don't use, etc. Let's do it.
And also, okay, that's one of the questions. The other one is like issuing pass IDs for the max number of allowed passes, or just issuing one pass ID for like one additional pass.
No, we discussed that already, Miria. Yes, we should recommend it.
Okay.
You cannot enforce it because packet gets lost, whatever. But we should recommend it. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so as chair, I'm seeing that there's interest in writing better recommendations to improve interoperability, which seems a bit like a no-brainer. We're obviously constrained with exactly what we can say, but that we should do this. And somebody's going to write a PR. Is there somebody who wants to volunteer to hold the pen on that? Or are you going to just resolve it as an author group for the next draft?
I think I can probably give it a try. But Quentin, please.
I can also make a PR solving this if you want.
Okay, that works as well.
Okay, cool.
Okay. As I'm kind of moderating this here, I want to capture this and go back to 332 for 1 second, which is the one about the active connection ID limits. Okay, so, and this goes all the way back to the very beginning of our discussion today. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that having the max pass, so if you don't define the connection ID limit per pass, but per connection, you don't need the max path value. You don't need to signal the max path value. I think you can still use the same connection ID allocation strategy that we just defined right now. It's just you do have to do a little bit of guessing, or like you don't know the max pass number from the other end, you just know your own max pass number, and you can issue passes for that maximum number. If you're not super stupid and set like it's a too small value to the active connection ID, like I think everything will fine and the same connection ID allocation strategy will work. So I don't think this is more complicated. So the one thing I want to say here is that if we have the max pass parameter, we have the max pass frame, and we also have the max pass transport parameter, which means if we want to allow server initiated passes, we need a new transport parameter for the max passes of the server to also announce that side. If we don't have the max pass transport parameter, we actually don't need a new transfer parameter. We can just like allow server initiated passes without any change here and without any overhead. I just wanted to come back to that one because we discussed about this at the very beginning. I want to make sure that people understand this implication. Michael.
Yeah, I was thinking now we're using the minimum of the 2 max paths. Can't you just use like the stream? So max streams is in one direction only. It says how many streams are you allowed to connect to me or set up in my direction, and then the max streams in another direction says how many paths are. So you basically separate them.
That doesn't work because then you kind of can enforce an unlimited number of connection IDs and passes on the other end.
Yeah, but, okay, you can. If you signal connection IDs, you mean for more paths than because you're setting up state. Yeah, that's a good reason.
So just a clarification question, Miriam. I posted a comment that we would issue a consensus call to close this issue with no action. Is anything you're saying now questioning that earlier outcome?
So yes, so what I'm saying is basically there is a connection here to the question of do we allow server initiated passes, which is a question that is still open. We didn't put on the agenda here, which we have a separate issue for a long time and probably need still some discussion for it, right? So that is connected to the question, do we allow server initiated passes? And if we keep the connection ID per pass limit, then having server initiated passes means we need a new transport parameter, which means we could like equally well do it in extension. We don't have to decide now. If we decide that the active connection ID limit is per connection, we don't need a new transport parameter for server initiated passes, and we should probably decide right now if we want it or not.
That's not true.
Sorry, I'm like
that is not true, Miria.
Okay.
That is not true.
Okay.
You could have a global limit on connection ID, and then you just have to decide with some kind of tie breaking which one gets to use what.
That's what I'm saying. If you have a global limit on connection ID, it's fine. But if you have,
But it's also true if you have a global limit on pass IDs.
if you have a global limit on path IDs,
it's also
okay.
true.
But then is that what we have right now? Is this a global limit on path ID?
Yeah, that's what we have.
Okay.
It's a global limit negotiated by the two parties.
Okay, yeah, no, you're actually right. This was like, yeah, you're right. This was connected to the even odd split where it would be more complicated. But yeah, if we don't have that, yes, you're right. Okay, sorry, I'm wrong. You're right.
No, I think this is showing that we do need to reflect even more changes into the document so that we're all like there's loads of great details there, but they are potentially a bit confusing. And you guys the authors were holding so many potential variants in their heads to help us get over the issue that we resolved on path IDs at Brisbane. This is kind of the fallout from that and getting us all on the same baseline. So no, I think I'm seeing a clear way. People need to go away and make some PRs, and I think as I say, the consensus call on the list will help do this stuff. But it's becoming a lot more clear to me. So I really appreciate people's time at this interim to actually have some breathing space to talk about these things without trying to rush it all in half an hour or so. With that said, were there more issues on your list, Maria, or if we?
No, I think this is the issues we really wanted to discuss. We have a few more design issues, but we believe these are less kind of burning and less fundamental and less interconnected. So these are much smaller. We can make a decision and move on. So these are the big ones. Yeah.
Because I'd given us 3 hours to get through things, purely because I didn't want to rush it through. We're at 1 hour and 45 minutes. no one ever complains if I finish meetings early. I think we could potentially look at wrapping up now, unless we did want to go and pick through some other topics. I don't want to put you on the spot because I know sometimes people like to prepare stuff, and there's no point wasting time if we're not actually prepared to have a discussion about things. We'll just be throwing opinions out. So yeah, I'd be happy to start wrapping stuff up, but I'm keen to hear from others if they object strongly to finishing early.
I mean, I think you will probably summarize this as a chair on the list anyway, but maybe I can take 2 minutes to summarize what I understood on the issues. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you go for it.
Okay. So we discussed 6 issues today, more or less. The first one was about the even-odd split, and we basically say the current proposal is to not do anything here right now and close the issue. Then we discussed the issue that we still have at the stream 332. Again, the proposal is to not do anything here and close the issue. Then we discussed about path closure, and this was issue 313. And we decided to change the close-up procedure, and Christian is going to work on a PR for that. We also briefly discussed issue 366, which is about requiring path abandon frames also on timeout and probably also on path failure. And requiring means changing the should to a must. That wasn't discussed much, but I think there was agreement, and it will be part of the same PR that Christian is probably working on. Then we very briefly discussed 3.118, which is the question about path ID should be continuous. I think there was also a clear yes, because that will probably make path allocation easier. And then there is the whole issue, which is 338, about the path allocation strategy and giving more recommendations about to do the right thing, where Quentin will work on a PR. Last chance to disagree here. Or on the mailing list, actually.
I'm not saying anything, and I'm pretty happy with how things have gone. So
Me too.
yeah, thank you very much, everyone, and apologies for any date time mistakes and late binding the echo links that weren't put places. Thank you very much to our note takers as well, and yeah, I think this has been good. Just in a high level question, I presume the authors will cut a new draft before the next IETF meeting. Is that a fair assumption, Miria?
Yes, I think that's absolutely the plan, yes.
Okay, that sounds good.
Also, before the next IETF meeting, I think we want to really have another interrupt, so hopefully we can have the draft early on.
So you're saying an interrupt target for that next draft?
For the next draft, yes.
Okay, that sounds good to me. I'll confer with my co-chair Matt after, and we'll write up an email and get that sent out in the next couple of days, just to reflect this meeting. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.